Hey everyone, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about cyber insurance because cyber insurance may soon become irrelevant in a very critical way. Now, as you know, if you've worked with anybody in cybersecurity, we usually always recommend getting cyber insurance. That is that coverage for your liability when you get hit and the ransom attackers want, 300 grand to unlock you and all of that. They'll bring in forensics teams. They'll help negotiate down the ransom. They'll pay the ransom for you per your policy and all of that. This is why this is a really good coverage for a business, but that is about to change. And this is a little concerning. We'll dive into this. Now, this is coming from Cyberscoop, and anyone who basically wants to help ransomware victims pay off their attackers who are under U.S. sanctions could actually face fines and penalties. And this is according to the Treasury Department yesterday in the United States. Now, an advisory from the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, that's the OFAC, served notice to financial institutions and cyber insurance companies, as well as cybersecurity firms, that basically help victims pay off ransomwares and obviously identify and respond to attacks, that basically we could suffer fines if we are aiding payments to attackers from places like North Korea, Iran, Russia, etc., that are on the U.S. sanctions list. Now, the OFAC indicated that it would be inclined to be strict about this as well, meaning those civil penalties could be leveled against companies that didn't know they were facilitating ransom payments to attackers that were on the sanctions list. Meaning, if I am helping you unscrew yourself, I have to verify as best that I can that these attackers are not on any kind of U.S. sanction list in the United States. Otherwise, I am sending money potentially to what the U.S. Treasury Department considers a foreign adversary. And to quote the Office of the OFAC, and I quote, OFAC may impose civil penalties for sanctions violations based on strict liability, meaning that a person subject to U.S. jurisdiction may be held civilly liable even if it did not know or have reason to know it was engaging in a transaction with a person that is prohibited under sanctions laws and regulations administered by the OFAC. Now, some of the more notable ransomware names on the list of U.S. sanctions include those that the OFAC tied to things like developing CryptoLocker, helping to funnel SamSam funds, and also basically the people behind WannaCry 2.0. Now, the office will review each case individually, apparently, when deciding when to impose these fines, but said that, and I quote, self-initiated, timely, and complete report of a ransomware attack to law enforcement would help avoid civil penalties, as would cooperating with law enforcement. Meaning, they are trying to spin up basically a de facto reporting tool that is requiring cyber insurance companies as well as cybersecurity firms helping in this manner to essentially try to contact law enforcement to get them involved to have that official report and all of that. And I find that to be very interesting, in its own right. Now, abetting payments to attackers poses potential national security risks, according to the OFAC, and they explain this, and I quote, ransomware payments made to sanctioned persons or to comprehensively sanctioned jurisdictions could be used to fund activities adverse to the national security and foreign policy objectives of the United States. Ransomware payments may also embolden cyber actors to engage in future attacks. That is actually true. I believe that last statement is also noted that the rise in ransom demands, obviously are happening during COVID-19. I can personally tell you that is absolutely true. The amount of calls we've gotten from companies that need to get unstuck that we've never worked with before, I think this is the most I've had in a 1-year period, or almost a 1-year period in that sense. Now, OFAC fines can basically exceed several $1 million, according to their statement. And the advisory also comes a day after the Department of Homeland Security and Infrastructure Agency and the Joint Multi-State Information and Sharing Analysis Center, or ISAC, released a joint ransomware guide as well. So that is something to note here, but I find this to be very interesting, primarily because oftentimes we don't necessarily know where the attackers are coming from. We may have good intelligence on where they might, but I think that's going to be a very interesting thing. It also seems like they are pushing corporations basically to go straight to law enforcement to declare a data breach when you don't necessarily have to do that in a data breach. If you look at the CCPA, for example, you notify the authorities in CCPA, but that's not necessarily law enforcement so much as it is essentially a body to protect consumers. So I'm very curious to see if this will actually hold water. I do believe the United States House of Representatives and Congress has the ability to vote these things up and down because they are the ones that run the budget for the United States. I can also understand the position of the United States here as well. Obviously, you wouldn't want to start funneling money, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year, to essentially attackers in a place like North Korea that could be propping up a government that is adversarial to not just the United States, but its allies and much of the world. So I think it's a very interesting thing that we have to deal with and contend with here. But my concern would be that companies are looking at this saying, well, then why the heck am I even paying for cyber insurance if they're not going to pay the fine, which is why I'm paying them? And I think that's the bigger concern that I've got here overall. This move may ultimately start hindering businesses that are making that cost calculation risk to say, I'm not going to get cyber insurance because I don't need it. And oftentimes those businesses might be small to mid-size and not have the enterprise level defense that we see with larger organizations and corporations. So I think it's a double-edged sword that they're playing with here, and we're going to see where this runs. But I'm waiting for the first case of a company to come out publicly and say, we would have had cyber insurance, but basically we saw what the government did and thought it was a waste of money. And I think that would be essentially doing a disservice, not just to the cyber insurance companies, but to the companies that need cyber insurance. So it's something I'm still going to recommend. But there's a large caveat to this right now, in the sense that, you better hope your attacker's coming from an allied country or the United States, or you can in some way, shape, or form prove it, that you've done your due diligence to prove that. Otherwise, you may be essentially looking at fines, meaning the cyber insurance company or the cybersecurity outfit may be looking at fines much larger than what your client would actually pay you to remediate the situation. So I think that's a huge, huge problem that we're going to see here. And that is your news of the day. And I'm really hoping that we can actually sit down and have a civil discussion on this, not just us, but also the government as well, because I think this one needs to be thought out a little bit more. I think we might be doing ourselves a disservice in the long term at the expense of, let's say, lowering dollars to countries we're not fans of, which I get, but do we really want to have a ballooning problem here with people getting attacked and no real recourse, and then the business is out of business? We'll see. But that is your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.